it's just about time. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this started. So today, thank you for joining us on this webinar on the 5 worst incentive program ideas and how to fix them. And we have our speakers here today. Let me introduce you Kelly Coons, IP, Director of Incentives over here at BrightSpot. We also have Jason Neal, Director of Information Technology, also at BrightSpot. And then we also have Polly Chabra, IP, Senior Program Manager, also at BrightSpot. And I did want to ask, what does that IP mean? And Kelly, could you answer that question for me?
Sure. That IP stands for Incentive Professional. It is a certification earned through the Incentive Marketing Association after weeks of study and passing a rigorous exam.
Perfect. Thanks for that. I do also want to mention that we have one more webinar in this series that's happening August 25th, Getting Started, Creating a Profitable Incentive. So we kind of talk some bases beforehand, kind of some tools and best practices. And now on this webinar, this upcoming one, we'll be talking about actually getting started with the profitable incentive. We also want to hear back from you. So go ahead and click that Q&A button on the very bottom there, if you could. If you have any questions anywhere throughout, we'll get to them at the very end of the webinar. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Jason.
Appreciate that, Sebastian. So bad idea number 1, prioritizing execution over design and discovery. And it's interesting that a question that we get, and usually it's the question that comes from a new potential client: how long does it take to launch a program? And I know we're not supposed to answer a question with a question, but I want to ask the question, how thorough are your discovery documents? Because bottom line, are you ready to execute? And Kelly's going to share some of the issues that come with prioritizing execution over design and discovery.
Thank you, Jason. Let's see, I won't quite tell you what to do. I'll leave that to Polly, but we will share some of the pitfalls that we work to counsel clients and prospects away from. The first one, having an unclear motivational strategy. So often we'll be on calls with prospects, and we'll ask, well, what are your goals? What matters most in this incentive program? And it's real quick, close sales and incentivized pipeline. That's it. But we know that a good discovery process will lead to so much more than that. So instead of having an unclear strategy, instead of complicating the point and rule structure, or even having a point value disparity, and I'll share a story about that point value disparity just to expand on it a little bit. One example that I would share is that we ran a program where awards were worth different values, and the participants in the program were very savvy and quickly could figure out which award gave them the most bang for their buck. And it was not exactly the award type that the client would have preferred. So in the rush to execution, we ended up making point values very disparate. So I will let Polly tell you what we would have recommended instead.
Yeah, and so you see the 3 icons there: discover, design, and execute. It really starts with a thorough discovery, and it's what we recommend with all of our clients and prospects as well. We really want to take the time to look through who the participating audience are, and it's not just their workforce or sort of what they are and represent to your company, but it's also their demographics and their psychographics to really understand what drives the behaviors and what will incentivize them and get them engaged in your program. So that the underlying thing there is taking the time to figure out what are the behaviors that we actually want to change or incentivize, as opposed to trying to figure out what we can launch to sell right away. When it comes to design, we look at program structure, and I'll use a quote from, if you guys are Office fans, you'll know this one, but Michael Scott said, "Keep it simple, stupid." And so we take that to heart, and we really try to keep things as simple as possible from the get-go. You never want to launch a program, or it's never a good idea to launch a program with too many bells and whistles, especially if it's a brand new program to a brand new audience. you're going to be throwing too much at them too quick, and it's just going to create confusion more so than engagement and excitement. So really, it started with something as simple as sell this, get this, and then gain traction and get your audience engaged, and then you can start adding things on top of that. Is really the best approach that we've seen doing incentive programs. And then the last one, as far as execution goes, it's awarding appropriately. So to what Kelly said, you don't want to have a company, if you're selling multi-$1,000 medical devices and you have a gift card catalog with $5, $10, $15 gift cards, it's just not going to do anything to excite and move the needle the way you want to. On the other hand, if you have more of a majority blue collar workforce, or even selling in rural areas, you might want to give a catalog structure or an award structure with lower denominations, but more frequent times to award your participants, and that'll keep them more engaged and more active throughout your program. So I can talk forever about different strategies, but those are just sort of the underlying main three things to really start focusing on in rolling out an incentive program.
Thanks, Polly. So moving to bad idea number 2, it would be not considering program timeline in relation to sales cycle. Incredibly important when it comes to spiffs and incentive programs, because so often, I'm sure many of you listening today and those of us on this call so often come across that very zealous sales manager that believes that this spiff is the one that's going to work and it's got to happen in a certain amount of time. But I will let Polly share with you what not to do and expand on that just a little bit more.
All right, Jason, I'm going to give you the greatest incentive program that I've ever designed in the history of the world here, and I want you to tell me your thoughts. So I've got a software integration company. We're launching in Q4, by the way. So this is going to be October through December, launching in a couple of months. I got a huge budget. I want to do a huge holiday blowout with this one. So basically, we're giving away a Ferrari. We're just going to make this one last. It's going to be the greatest thing ever. Who doesn't want a Ferrari, right? So all you have to do in this program, I'm going back to my Michael Scott School of Business, keep it simple. So any opportunities that are registered in Q4, convert those to a closed won deal, and you're entered in to win a Ferrari. What do you think?
My first question as a sales rep, it would be, what is the sales cycle?
The sales cycle for this one, typically we're looking at 4 to 6 months on any average deal size, but for the more complex deals, it could get pushed out to about 8 months.
Just long enough not for me to participate in the program. And that's the point, guys. It's so funny. I coach my son's little league team, and we're running drills, and I make the time shorter and shorter because I'm going to push them. And one of the kids, just out of pure frustration, right? He stops and he says, "Give us a chance, coach." Just give us a chance. And that's the same sentiment we have from so many participants that are involved in these programs. Just give us a chance. And part of that is making sure that we understand what the sales cycle is, and just a little bit of help. For any successful program, you talk about the minimum that you need, sales cycle times 2 or 3, right? So if you have a 3-month sales cycle, you have to at least have a 6-month program. If you talk about a month and a half on the front end to be able to get consistent communications out, you have the minimum for the sales cycle to be able to motivate them to close a deal. And then afterward, they need time to be able to redeem. So depending on deal size, depending on whether it's inside versus outside, if you have an inside sales team, of course, it's going to be easier to communicate to them. Those are your direct employees. If you have a distributed sales team or an outside sales team, that takes time. Right? A lot of that's word of mouth, one rep talking to another. No matter how much you push those communications out, it's really tough to reach them. And maybe it takes 6 months to reach critical mass and be able to then start with the sales cycle process. The other is something as obscure as seasonality, right? It's very tough to run a spiff to sell AC units in November, right? You're not going to have I don't care what kind of program you have, right? In winter, it's very hard to sell air conditioners. And you don't want to set a unreasonable expectation for the sales force or have an unreasonable expectation for your promotions. So one thing, got to account for ramp up time, especially if they're distributed. Give them a chance, understand they need a little bit more time. And unfortunately, many incentive programs just are too short to be impactful and to be effective. Definitely something to consider. And kind of the icing on the cake, If you have a number of different SKUs or products that you're selling, and they're kind of the most popular ones that are pretty level throughout the year, start a program based on that. And then if you want to jazz things up, then you can add your overlays on top of it. Then you can add the trip to the Bahamas. Then you can add some of those tougher to sell or longer sell cycle SKUs and be able to have an overlay or a specifically for those. But when it comes to that core program, and I'm going to take a hint from Polly, start simple, start with something that'll be consistent, and then you can go from there.
That's a great point, Jason. I think before we move on, I would add or expound on something that you were mentioning as far as when it comes to a new program, considering run rate and take rate. With a newly launched program, it's okay to include a little bit more run rate because we know that the take rate will be lower with a new incentive program. It always surprises me how often we are asked, well, how much run rate is too much run rate? So of course, that comes with another discovery question as far as what do you think your take rate will be? But to answer that question, for a new channel sales program or sales program in general, we recommend up to 30% run rate being included as part of that simple core program, because one, it gets a lot of attention, it ramps up that engagement cycle and increases your adoption rate in the long run. And of course, as take rate goes up, that's when we would bring run rate down just a little bit to help protect the budget. So,
great point, Kelly. Appreciate that.
All right, so now we go into bad incentive design idea number 3, and that's audience unknown or not getting to know your audience, if you will. So there's lots of different ways that you can look at this situation as far as audience goes. Is it employee versus channel? How easily this program could be integrated into someone's job, domestic versus global. There's lots of different things to look at as far as what the audience actually means. And so I'm going to let Jason tell us maybe some of the things that get overlooked in some scenarios as far as the audience goes.
Well, and thank you, Paul. I have a perfect example for this. And of course, with these scenarios, names are changed to protect the innocent and the guilty. So let's just say that we have a client called Crystal, and it's going to be Crystal. So Crystal is very sharp, been running programs with us for years. They've been very successful. And there's a new opportunity for Crystal in a different vertical, right? So she's switching jobs, working for a new company, coming to us to help her out like we have in the past. And here's one thing about Crystal. Crystal loves the process of curating the catalog more than anything else. We can do our design and our discovery. We go through graphics. She's like, oh, those are good enough. We talk about, all of the different facets or the conversion rates that we can have for these products. Yeah, that'll work fine. But when it comes to that catalog, Crystal will go through, look at all of the different products, make sure that she likes them all. We talk about the price points, and she just loves everything that's in there and surrounded with this process. But here's the thing. Crystal has a little blind spot, and she suffers from what I call thrift shopper syndrome, right? She wants to set up a catalog exactly the way that she would like to have her shopping experiences. And Crystal is a thrift shopper. So what she truly wants is a lot of products, right? A lot to choose from, maybe 2,000, 3,000 products. And also, she'd like them to all be a little less than $50, right? Just because, hey, the more money you have, the cheaper they are, the more you can get. Because everyone loves a shopping experience where they purchase 20 things, right? And for this new program, we raised the yellow flag, right? And said, I don't know, we're looking at your demographic, Crystal. Maybe not for this one. And she went forward, launched, and unsuccessful, or not nearly as successful as she would have liked, right? And you may be able to imagine why, but Kelly's going to give us a little more information on how we can avoid this trap.
thanks, Jason. And I like that story because I will tell the audience we did not rehearse this part because one of my favorite things to do on a day off is to go thrift shopping and hunt for that treasure at a low cost, just like Crystal. But what we would recommend to Crystal are evaluating a few things when building the program. A couple of things that Polly alluded to earlier. First of all, being participant demographics. who they are, what's their income, their age, education, things like that, things that make up who they are, and their psychographics, which is the things that matter to them, their values, their interests, their lifestyle. So consider those things, and as opposed to just what Crystal or what you want. That's one of the mistakes that we see clients make most is pick what they like as opposed to what the audience would like. So evaluate those two things. And then again, offer choice. Choice is great. Choice is a good thing. We all appreciate having options in this world. But what we have found to be true is that too much choice is a bad thing. And research from the Incentive Research Foundation supports that as well. You see the words on the screen called choice paralysis. That is the phrase used to coin the term when you're simply overwhelmed by the choices ahead of you. A good example of that, while it's lighthearted and not data-driven, is someone asking me what I wanted for lunch today. And my answer was, please just pick. I don't want to have to make one more decision. And that's what choice paralysis is. Please don't make me make one more decision. So we recommend curating the perfect award type, for example, to make the choice palatable and easy. And then lastly, sometimes clients will ask us, prospects will ask, well, what's the magic number? What's it going to take just to get attention, to get eyeballs on my program? And that magic number is $100. Again, I will disclaimer that with, it also depends, on the demographic and psychographic of the audience. As you can imagine, higher income, longer sales cycle, that number creeps up. And of course, if it's the opposite of that, that number can creep down. But the magic number in today's day and age tends to be $100.
So what you're saying, Kelly, is that 50 really didn't move the needle for those participants?
Not in this case, Jason. No.
Right.
And with that, I will hand it to you, sir.
Absolutely. And this is one from a technical perspective that hurts my spirit. Reporting in reverse, and not to steal any thunder from Kelly. She's going to tell you why this is a pitfall, but the bottom line is don't approach reporting backwards. Kelly, can you expound on that a little bit?
I sure can. And I will give you two tragic examples just to be a little bit dramatic. Not so often, fortunately, infrequently, is it that we build a great program, we launch a great program, everyone's so excited about it. And either the next day or the next week, I have to walk down the hallway to Jason's office, our IT director, and tell him that we need to reconfigure a reporting need because it was simply an afterthought post-launch, or even worse. 6 months into the program, we take a look at program insights and analytics, and we realize that there isn't reporting there to support showing ROO or ROI or KPIs that are so important to the stakeholder to be able to state whether or not the program was a success. So instead of falling into one of those tragic traps, Polly will tell you what to do instead.
Well, really, it goes back to what I said previously, and it's back to discovery and starting with the data itself. And so for what this program is, it's really answering the question of what will determine the success of this program. And if you don't have all the metrics you need up front when you start building this out, then you're going to miss things and run into scenarios like you mentioned, where we're scrambling after the fact to try and find the data that we need once the program's already launched. Design around having as much data up front as possible. Even if we don't need it now, like maybe we're going to run a program where everyone in the continental United States is enrolled in a program, but in 4 or 5 months down the road, you might want to run a program that's based on specific regions. And if we didn't have those regions to begin with, we don't know which are your top performing regions, which ones this will apply to. If we want to do a pilot program for our region, things like that we don't really think of now, but we just get it ahead of the time, or just get us more than what we need, or start with more than what you need is always going to be beneficial. And that goes to beginning with the end in mind. So thinking long-term of where you want this program to grow, where you want it to evolve. That's really the key as far as when it comes to data, is just always think of the end goal, not just what you need right now.
I think one thing I want to mention from a technical perspective, adding additional fields in the database is easy before the program launches. After the program launches, it gets a lot more expensive. So think of it, even if you don't need country, don't need region, let's go ahead and collect it. Great point, Polly.
So you're saying future-proof the platform.
as much as possible.
Always good advice from an IT director. Let's see, and since I'm already talking, I'll steal the floor for bad idea number 5. And it might be my personal favorite slide in this entire webinar. But one of the worst things that can happen is your incentive program can become the best kept secret simply because communications were incredibly underfunded and undervalued. What we see a lot is the program means the world to the stakeholder, but in the sales space, in the channel space, it's incredibly fragmented and disjointed, which makes the need for communications so much more important. So with that being said, Polly, I'll let you speak to what not to do.
All right, so Jason, while we've been going through this, I went back to my my scenario that I pitched to you earlier, and I've refined it a little bit. So this one's going to work this time. I have a feeling, in come hell or high water, I'm giving away this Ferrari. You can't stop me this time.
Okay.
So what we've done is we've gone back to the powers that be, and they've agreed to extend our program out to be a year-long program. So we got a whole year to launch this program now.
It took some of that consulting we gave him.
I've kept it simple with Michael Scott. I've got with Stephen Covey, began with the end in mind. I got my 7 habits all ready to go. Caveat here is that it needs to launch in 2 weeks. What do you think?
No, it will be the best. Now, and here's the thing, right? If the client is okay with not having barely any activity for the first 2 or 3 months of the program, then sure, you can start a communications plan 2 weeks ahead of time. But that's something to definitely consider. And matter of fact, when we talk about communications plan, that's the key. And when we say communications plan, sometimes what we hear is, we'll take care of our communications internally. We got Marketo, we got HubSpot. We're running this program. It's going to be about 6 months. We'll send out maybe an email a month just to keep it top of mind. An email a month won't keep anything top of mind. When you talk about the number of emails that it takes, especially when you get into a competitive space, the first email that you send is going to be deleted. The second email, they may read the subject line. It'll be the third email where they actually say, hey, this looks familiar. Let me actually read it, right? And that's the reality that we live in. So part of it is make sure that there's a communication plan. Make sure you get ahead of the game and appropriately market your program prior to launch. If you have an expectation that ramp up is going to be there day one, right? You want people eager, excited. They're asking you and reaching out to you, hey, what's the start date again? I'm ready to go. And that takes, I say weeks, months of effective communication ahead of the fact. Also, the other part of that is personalizing monthly statements. So yes, there is a place for a monthly statement, and we love monthly statements, right? I mean, just like for your bank, you get a bank statement. Back when they came in the mail and you didn't do it online, they came each month, right? And you would say, hey, this is what I did. This is the activity. This is where I make sure that I'm staying on top of things. And that's the same thing with these participants. So it's a touch point that you have, and you can leverage that touch point where they think they're just getting the number of points and driving them to the website, but you can stick some other marketing tidbits in there about other programs and things that are going on with your organization and leverage that communication, which we found gets a lot more visibility and eyeballs, right, from those participants than some of those random drip campaigns. They look forward to this. So other ones they'll delete, but the monthly statement, that's the one they're going to click on. Leverage it. And then also utilize automated communications. So I work with our incentive platform, and we want to make sure that we utilize some of those triggers throughout the life cycle of that participant to be able to send appropriate communications every time that you have a claim submitted, every time that you have an activity or a claim that's been progressed to approved, every time you get points. We want to make sure that there's an email. And once again, we send that email that they expect, that email they're comfortable with and going to read, gives you another opportunity. Hey, there's a new promotion coming in the next 30 days or something to look forward to. Add a little jazz, add some pizzazz to it. So marketing is great. You don't want your program to be the best kept secret. But the biggest thing is to start early. And when people say that, how much is too much? As much as you can, right? Because there is a lot of competition in the space. And the more you keep your product or your process or your program top of mind, the better off you'll be.
Jason, I'll answer the question you kind of asked, and I will say there's no such thing is too much communication, especially when it comes to an incentive program in a competitive space.
Yes.
You know, since we're a little bit ahead on time, I would maybe add two things to that. You know, monthly statements are great, and they give you a lot of information that's consumable. What we've also seen trending up and what we've seen success with are smaller little bites of information just to help keep things top of mind. So often we see clients get overwhelmed by the need to write copy or come up with all of this information that it becomes the cobbler's shoes. And that's the last thing that we want to see. So for those that might feel daunted by communication, just keep it small and get something out there, and you'll see quite a yield on that investment.
Great point.
Go ahead and return now, because it is question and answer time. So we already have some questions. I do want to cover a few things, but if anybody else want to answer or ask some questions, please select the little button on the bottom here and Q&A button and submit your question. And during this time, I'd like to also give a shout out to some resources that we have that could be useful to you. So we do have a channel partner rewards guide or how-to guide we'd like to share with you, and everyone attending this webinar will receive a PDF version of the link. So if you can't take them down right now, you'll see them come through your inbox. And the second item here is one of our new blog items or blog posts, in channel incentive program design, best practices for reporting and ROI. So go ahead and click that or type that and mark that down for later. So coming back to our questions, I do have one here. So the first question asks, how would the $100 magic number vary by audience type? And they're thinking sales engineer, retail, store manager, etc.
Well, I'll jump in. And the first answer is it should vary, absolutely, and it does vary. That magic number gets eyeballs, but that number can dial up or down depending on sales engineer. In that example, higher income, higher education. In order to achieve a certain behavior, there's probably a good amount of time, investment, or lift involved to achieve it. So $100 is a good fit for that demographic. The opposite side of that, if it's a more hourly employee, maybe lower income, lower effort to achieve that activity, that 100 could skew down. That's where we'd want to work through the discovery process to determine that magic number.
Sounds good. Thank you for that. Next question I have, who should be the one who starts with the data in mind, the prospect, client, or use the SME?
And I'm happy to take that one. That's a great question. Sorry,
go ahead.
Sebastian. Okay.
Sorry, go ahead. My bad.
So I'll take that. And what I would say, ideally, both, but that's our responsibility, right? You're coming to us as a potential customer and asking us, hey, based on your experience, what are the fields that we need to collect for enrollment? What are the fields that are needed for reporting? What are some of the trends that you see to be able to prove ROI and ROO after the fact? And do you have that reporting as part of your platform? Our platform out of the box has canned reports. We have 12 different reports that we've seen, through our experience, help you to be able to fill those gaps and tell that story when you're going to that stakeholder and trying to get additional budget. And also part of that is from a client's perspective. Where do you want to be? Where do you want your program to be? 3 years, 5 years? Do you want it to be global? What are some of those considerations? So we can definitely help guide you, but with you knowing your product, your environment, and kind of the direction that you want to go, the clients can definitely help us along the way.
Gotcha. Let's see if we can get another one in here. Question goes, does BrightSpot offer consulting to an existing incentive program?
Yes, absolutely. If you have an existing program, we'd love to work through that discovery process with you. Great question.
Short and to the point. I like it. And here's another one. When is the right time to start investing in an incentive program?
I probably speak to this one. In short, today, like the time is now. It's never too soon, I should say. But if you're looking at it more from a monetary standpoint, what we typically see when your rewards budget gets above a $100,000 threshold, that's really when we see a internal team is kind of stretched too thin to carry out a successful program, and then it's when having a truly standalone program that BrightSpot provides is best suited for. So really, we see in more cases than not, it's when that rewards budget crosses the $100,000 threshold.
Perfect. Thank you. Let's see if we can try to answer one. And we're just about at time here. So here's the question: is print collateral / communications still worth spending, or should we just do electronic?
Oh, it's worth it. I think it absolutely worth it. It went through, actually, I would say it's going through a renaissance and should very much be considered as a complement to the very digital world that we are living in. So absolutely, it's worth investing in utilizing every communications channel possible to make an impact.
And one thing to add to that, and I have a 15-year-old son, and he received a letter from his grandmother in the mail, and he about flipped out. He has it pinned on the wall. For one, it's the first letter he's ever received in his life, more than most likely. And that is something that's dear to him just because it's different, right? It's almost retro. So we're amazed at how successful some of those campaigns are just because people don't expect it. They expect email and ignore that, but getting physical print collateral in the mail, it's like a Christmas gift.
Great point.
I have one more. I think this is a good question, so I'm going to try to squeeze it in here. Is offering multiple reward types a good or bad idea? Should we just offer one?
I'll jump in. We want to offer the award that's a best fit for the demographic. Could that be one? Maybe. Could that be more than one? Possibly. But throwing the whole kitchen sink at an audience is not, we'd say the juice isn't worth that squeeze, because you'll find that everyone just opts for cash. So we'd rather work to determine the best one or two award types for the demographic.
Gotcha. Well, cool. Well, I guess we can wrap things up right there. So I just wanted to appreciate everyone's time here and joining us today. Thank you, Polly, Jason, Kelly, for all your insight. We'll go ahead and let everybody go. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.